Hey guys, welcome back. So today's video is going to be more of a discussion. I will be totally honest, I did not at all prepare. I have no talking points. I only have a general concept and a list of books as examples. So without further ado, I guess let's jump into the video. As I'm filming this, full disclosure, I still don't even know what I'm going to title it, but hopefully as I kind of talk it through with you guys, something will come to mind, but if not, I will just wing it. So today I want to talk about audiobooks, but more specifically audiobooks that I actually did not like. So much so you would even say that I loathed some of them. We'll get into the details of that later. But as a reader, obviously it's no surprise that I listen to audiobooks a lot. It probably makes up about 30 to 40% of my overall reading. I love them for very obvious reasons, just in terms of like the convenience and being able to multitask, all that good stuff. However, I am very particular, surprisingly, about which audiobooks I pick up, because even if I want to read a book, I won't necessarily automatically choose the audiobook format, which is something interesting that I recently discovered upon myself when I was thinking about this video. Now, I guess just to give you guys an example, I read a lot of romance, but there are some romance books that I just won't listen to on audiobook. And I think a lot of that comes down to a combination of the narrator and then also the subject matter, because let's be honest, there are clearly sexy times in romance novels, and if I'm not jibing with the narrator, oftentimes I will just decide to pick up the book physically instead so that I can kind of formulate my own voice in my head for that character. These books, however, totally threw me by surprise and I ended up hating them. However, I wonder if I only didn't like them because of the audiobook format, and if I read these books physically, would I have enjoyed them instead? So I kind of want to talk through that with you guys. Maybe I'm the only one and this is more of a confessional, but maybe you guys relate, you know, maybe there have been audiobooks that you have listened to, or maybe even vice versa, where it just wasn't meshing with you, and it wasn't until after you finished the book or decided to DNF that you're like, maybe if I would have read it instead or listened to it, I would have liked it better. So let's talk about, I guess, the first book that this was an example of, and that is the Death of Mrs Westaway. This book is by Ruth Ware. It's a thriller. That's pretty much all I'm gonna say about it, but I have tried 3 of Ruth Ware's books so far, and maybe it's my own fault because all 3 of them have been audiobooks so far, and I just cannot for the life of me get through them. And The Death of Mrs Westaway is a prime example because, you know, it was very slow paced. The author was very, let's say, intentional with her pacing and so much so that I had to speed that book up to like 1.75, a 2 by the time I was nearing the end, just because it was literally dragging on too much for me. And you know, Ruth Ware is a very popular author, especially in the thriller genre community, and I want to like her so bad, but this book just was not it for me. You know, she is, I believe, a British author, and so the person narrating the book was, they had an English accent, which is totally fine. That fits the character and all of that. However, I think that I just could not get on board with the way that they told the story. And you know, I gotta be honest, guys, I don't know why. I don't know if it was the accent. I don't think it is, because again, that's very true to the character because the story took place in the UK. But for some reason, it just was not hitting it for me. So let's talk about another example, which was 6 of Crows. I'll go ahead and take a second right now for you guys to collectively gasp, because I know this is a huge deal, especially since 6 of Crows just topped the Times, I think, 100 Best Fantasy list, which, great, I guess. Anyway, I tried to listen to this a couple of years ago, and nope, not for me. I fully admit that I ended up DNFing it, and I cannot for the life of me understand why, because technically this book checks off a lot of things that I like to see in books, just in terms of like a tight group of friends, a heist type situation, and yet I still could not get on board with this book. Again, I don't know if it was because of the audiobook version. If I would have read this physically, would I have been able to absorb and enjoy the story more? Thinking back, I wonder if it was the switching out of characters. I know that there's obviously a large cast of characters, and if I'm remembering correctly, I think it's narrated with a bunch of different people. But then again, I can't make excuses for that because I've listened to other audiobooks that have a whole ensemble of characters and I'm able to follow along just fine. So it's like I want to like the book and I find myself making excuses for why it's me and not the book. But that begs the question, if I would have read this book physically, would I have enjoyed it more? Would I have been able to paint a picture for myself of what the characters look like? Because let's be honest, obviously when we read, we envision the characters, but I feel like when you listen to audiobooks, you are kind of influenced a little bit more just based on how the narrator sounds, which is part of their job, and that's what makes them stand out narrators. And I think that might be one of the reasons why, it ended up being very flawed for me. I ended up finding some of the characters very immature, some of them overly mature, if that makes any sense. My husband and I both feel the same way about the book, and thinking about it, it almost felt like a Dawson's Creek episode in the sense to where you've got these young adults, I guess, describing things or perceiving things or saying things to sound smart, but it sounds like a young person trying to sound smart rather than just somebody who is naturally intellectual. I don't know. Am I making any sense? I realize this video is very rambly, but I wanted to get this off of my chest because I'm dying to know if you guys have ever felt this way about audiobooks. If so, let me know in the comments right now which books that are for you. And then I guess I'm looking for a little bit of advice because I do not typically reread books. I feel like there are way too many books in the world, which is one of the reasons why I don't reread. And I also DNF a lot of books because it's like I don't want to put myself through that torture if I'm not feeling a book. However, if these books maybe stand out, if I consume them in a different way, it might make it worth reading them in a different medium. So let's talk about another example. I've got my list here. Okay, this is it's not more recent, but another example is Lisa Jewell's The Family Upstairs. I believe this came out earlier this year or maybe late last year. It was all the rage and I was super excited because I started listening to it almost immediately when it first came out. The premise, again, sounds very interesting. It's a thriller. All of these books are books that I was extremely interested in and very excited. However, this one too was just so boring. I could not find myself to care about any of the characters. Some of the characters I actually found unlikable, and I don't know if that's just me or if that is purposeful. If you've read the book, please let me know. I think it takes a very skilled author to make a character unlikable and then the reader still want to know more about them or care enough about the story. I just didn't like the characters. I didn't care about the mystery. I think that the mystery was dragging on too much. But again, was that the pacing of the audiobook? Is that how it's supposed to be? I don't know, people. If I read this, will I enjoy it or will I think the same thing? It's all a mystery, no pun intended. But that's another example. And the final example that I have is actually something that I just put down. I decided to officially DNF it, even if it is a temporary DNF, and that is J.R. Ward's Dark Lover, which is the first book in the Black Daggerhood Brotherhood series, and I have been wanting to read this book forever. It's been on my TBR forever. I have passed it in the used bookstore like multiple times, but something always kept me from picking it up, and so I thought that listening to the audiobook would actually be the best way to consume it because I have no excuse. If I wanted to, I guess, kind of get into the story faster, I thought consuming the audiobook while I was doing other things would be the proper way, but it just, was not the case. And so let me break it down for you guys if you don't know what this book is about. It is a paranormal romance. It's this long-standing series. It's supposed to be fantastic. I even like put up a little poll on my Instagram to see if I needed to trudge along or if I was the only one who felt this way about the book, be it audio or physical. But in the end, guys, I ended up just dropping it because life is too short. And, you know, I still don't know quite why, because let's go with the facts, okay? So this is a paranormal romance, and it is the first in the series. I totally understand when it comes to first in series, there has to be a lot of foundational work done just in terms of like the world and the characters and setting up the tone of the story, blah, blah, blah. Totally get that. I'm not saying that, you know, all of my books have to start off with action sequences from page 1, though that wouldn't hurt. But I give some leeway in terms of building up the story. Totally fair. Another thing, though, however, was that this book was narrated by a male, which makes sense because the book is actually told from a male point of view. And is it always told, though? I think... No, it switches off because I believe we also get the female's point of view. However, the audio narration is told by a male. And if you guys have been around my channel for a while, you'll know that there are certain male narrators who I absolutely adore. This guy was not one of them. I don't know if it was his voice or if it was the story, but it seemed very one note, very, very flat, very one-dimensional. Even when they were talking about, you know, chemistry and certain feelings, I was just not feeling it from this guy. But again, is that the guy's fault or is it my fault? I don't know. This is one of those things, though, where it's like, I really want to get into this story. I've heard great things about it, but is it something that I would be able to appreciate if I were to just finally pick up the physical book and read it, or is it just not for me, which I'm fine with. I'm just super curious because this tends to be a pattern, as you can see, because I've already listed off a minimum of 5 books, but this seems to be a pattern when it comes specifically to audiobooks. Now, don't get me wrong, I obviously DNF physical books as well, but I feel like audio is something that stands out more to me because they tend to share a lot of characteristics amongst the different books because it spans genres clearly and, you know, narration styles and actual narrators. And so I'm wondering how much the medium or the type or the way you consume a book affects the actual book, you know. Again, I know that there are certain books that I will not listen to on audiobook just because when I listen to the sample, it's just not really resonating with me. But each of these books started off promising. It's not as if I listened to the first 3 minutes and I'm like, I might not like this. I was definitely pulled in, and that's usually the reason why I got dragged in so far, because a lot of the time, some of these books I either finished begrudgingly because I was just hopeful that it was going to get better or I DNF'd it, but I DNF'd it way into it. So for example, Six of Crows, even though I DNF'd it, I was at like the 80% mark, which I know some of you are probably like, you should have just finished it. No, I will DNF a book even with like 10 pages to go because life is too short, and I'm not one of those people where I'm like, I have to know what happens. That's why they have Wikipedia. Anyway, yeah, I know this video is rambly. Feel free to click off if you've waited this long, but hey, if you don't DNF, then I guess you'll watch to the end of the video. But I really am curious, and I wanted to kind of like explain this to you guys to see if I am the only one. If I am, I won't be at all surprised, but at the same time, if a lot of you feel like you have also suffered some form of this, again, it can be literally listening to the audiobook and not loving it and being affected, or it can be the total opposite where you try to continuously read a book and it's just not working for you, but then when you switch to the audiobook, you're just swept away in the story. I'm not one who needs a lot of production value with my audiobooks. In fact, I prefer not to have it. You know, give me 1 or 2 narrators at the most. I don't need any kind of like background music or sound effects. So I know it's not the simple audio recording that affects it, but at the same time, I just don't know. I don't know if it's the narrator, I don't know if it's me, I don't know if it's the pacing of the story, the style, what have you. It could be all of those things, it could be none of those things, but like I said, I wanted to talk about it with you guys. I guess the only way that I would know is if I were to take one of these books and actually physically try to read them. If that's the case, please let me know in your comments which ones you think I should give a shot, because again, all of these books are very popular, which is why I wanted to read them in the first place, but they just didn't mesh well with me. So if you think any of these books are definitely things that I have to read, let me know. I will begrudgingly give it a shot, or at least the old college try as much as I can, and then maybe we can come back. I can do another video with like an update of like, hey, I ended up loving this book, or actually no, the book just sucked and I didn't like it. Anyway, that will about do it. Thanks for sticking around if you're still around at this point, and if you enjoyed this video or these kinds of off-the-cuff discussions, feel free to like this video, subscribe if you would like, but in the meantime, happy reading, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!